Terri Libenson is the cartoonist for the syndicated comic strip The Pajama Diaries and the author of Invisible Emmy. Her comic has been in syndication for 10 years and she's been awarded multiple times for her greeting cards and her comic strips. So can you please tell us a little bit about your influences both as an illustrator and a writer?
Sure. Well, really I've been influenced mainly by comics. Growing up, I wasn't a huge reader growing up. I used to read a lot of comics. I used to steal my brother's comics from his room and hide them away in mine, and read them really avidly. And that was probably my greatest influence growing up. I became a much more avid reader later in life.
What were some of your favorite comic books?
Well, growing up, probably my biggest influence was Peanuts. So Charles Schulz, definitely. Probably ask any cartoonist and they'll say pretty much the same thing. But I also like Berkeley Breathed, Linda Berry. The list really goes on. I'm pretty eclectic that way.
So what's the hardest part about writing a daily comic strip and having to make something every single day?
Well, I get around that a little bit because I don't really write or illustrate every day. What I do is I kind of group them. So I'll write for about a week straight, write about a month's worth of strips, and then I'll narrow them down to what I hope are the strongest ones, and then I do all the artwork for about 2 weeks, and that kind of breaks it up a little bit for me, so I'm not constantly doing one or the other.
Do you ever have to change that if you want to make like a topical comic strip?
Yeah. Once in a blue moon that'll happen where I want to throw out something quickly, and so yeah, I'll break it up that way. But it's really, really rare, and I write more about social issues, not really anything political or too topical, unless the idea really kind of hits me, like you were saying.
So if you could write or draw another strip aside from the Pajama Diaries, what do you think it would be?
Oh, wow. Oh, I don't think anyone's ever asked me that. That's a really good question because it's been kind of in the back of my mind, like, would I want to do another one? I know with my comic strip, the kids age in real time, and they're getting old now. So I haven't thought too much about it. Plus, I've been writing these children's books, so that's been taking up a lot of time as well. But the wheels are beginning to turn.
Now, with those children's books, do you think you would ever move on to like more adult-oriented books, or do you think you'll just keep it with the kids' books?
Well, for now, definitely kids' books. I'm having a really good time writing these, and I feel like it's pretty natural for me. But if I ever wrote one geared for adults, it would be most likely in graphic novel form. And that's crossed my mind a bit, but that would probably be off in the future.
Now, where did the inspiration for Invisible Emmy come from?
Invisible Emmy stemmed from my own experiences as a 13-year-old kid, basically. I grew up very shy and quiet and artistic, and I really expressed myself through my drawings, and that's the same with my character Emmy. And really, I was just trying to kind of tap into that former self. And it's funny, I tend to write very autobiographically. I do that with the comic strip. I kind of write as myself as a mom, and with Emmy, I wrote about myself as a kid, and it seemed to work.
Was there ever like this impulse to give Emmy the middle school life that you wanted to live, where she's like the popular girl, gets A's or anything?
Well, if you read the book, there are two characters really. Emmy is one of them. She's the main character, but there's another character, Katie, and I kind of made her sort of the opposite of Emmy, and that's where I guess that wishful thinking kind of comes out.
What's the difference between writing daily comic strips and a full-length book?
Well, let's see. The book is a little more intense to me now. The comic strip, I kind of, I've got the flow down. It's kind of second nature. With the book, it's much more experimental. So it's a little scarier, but I'm writing my third one now, and it's less scary. I tend to really need, kind of like writing the comic strips, I need a large block of time to set aside so I don't feel rushed or pressured for deadlines, things like that. So I try and set aside as much time as possible, and that helps.
What is your favorite thing that you're reading right now? Comic book or just regular book?
I'm reading a really good book. It's taking me forever to get through it because I just haven't had time to really sit and read it completely through. But I've been reading page by page. It's called Why Comics by Hilary Shute, and I think I've been reading it for the past 3 months or so. I'm getting there, and it's fantastic, and I highly recommend it.
Now, what was it like making the switch from writing greeting cards to a syndicated daily comic strip?
Well, I was doing both at the same time for a long time. So it was pretty easy for me to separate it. With writing greeting cards, it's kind of like, sometimes it was like writing a single panel cartoon, depending what I was doing. Sometimes it was just writing a gag, and then the illustration was usually taken on by another artist. I did do some of my own illustration, but for the most part, I was just writing.
How heavy was sort of the direction you would give to the sort of illustrator for the card?
No real direction because I'm also an artist. I would usually just indicate maybe a character, or if it's a panel cartoon, I'd have it in rough form, so it would be really easy to go by, or that I'd leave it for interpretation.
What's the favorite storyline you've written for the Pajama Diaries?
Oh wow, that's a great question. Let me think. It's such a blur. There were a few early ones that I wrote that were pretty fun. One kind of harkened back in time to when the character was pregnant, and I did a whole month's worth of strips. So that was kind of a neat flashback and pretty fun to write for. So that one kind of sticks out in my mind.
Can you tell me anything about your upcoming projects?
Sure. Well, I have a new book coming out in a few weeks, May 1st. My follow-up to Invisible Emmy's coming out. It's called Positively Izzy. And I wouldn't call it a sequel, it's more of a spin-off. So I'm taking Emmy's best friend and turning her into the main character for this book. And I'm writing my third one, which is another spin-off, so 2 more characters, but they're all from kind of the same world, the same school, the same setting. So they're kind of in rotation at this point.
Now, what's different from like writing from Izzy perspectives versus Emmy's?
It was hard. It took me about 4 go-rounds, I think. I rewrote that book a lot under the direction of my editor, and it came together really well, thankfully. But because I was switching voices, and Brienne is a completely different character, and then there's another character that I threw in there as well on top of it, it was a little tough trying to come up with 2 unique voices, but luckily it gelled. So, and then with my third book, it kind of helped pave the way a bit.
Thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate you coming here at the 2018 Ohioana Book Festival.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Thank you.